Not all free motion quilting designs have to be complicated. As a matter of fact, sometimes the super simplest designs make for some of the best free motion quilting. I've got a really fun square grid for us to play with today. Let's get started. Okay, all quickly hone in down here close because I'm going to show you the most elaborate, and then we're going to back up and show you how simple this can all be in our square style gridded free motion machine quilting. It's a mouthful, but it's way easy at the machine. I'm going to give you a couple of different ways to do a bunch of these fun, wild fills, but what we're really going to do is focus on building ourselves a grid like this here. So this grid, as you see, I'm going to walk you through the chalking and then show you through some of the method of it. But what I'm really doing here is I have created a grid for myself, and early on I had used some chalk in here. So if I put this like this, hopefully you can see nice. This chalk for the rest of the video is going to represent our seam allowances. So yes, I'm doing some straight sewing, and a lot of us would consider this stitch in the ditch, but I'm doing it free motion style, and I'm not doing it in the ditch to make sure that the threads show up and we add character to our quilting. So I chalked on some basic lines that are 4-inch grid apart, but I put in 2-inch lines, as you'll see here in a second, so that I could go and start by putting a 1/4 inch on either side of my seam, or the chalk today, and then these other little micro lines on some of the sides just to add in some detail. Makes it look a bit like a plaid, but it makes some very cool looking machine quilting out of some very simple straight line sewing. So to get our grid ready, of course, I want you to start with a practice piece before you get into your real quilt. And I just have sandwiched together some nice solid fabric so I can see what I'm doing, and I've used a chalk pencil and a ruler. I put a few safety pins in to baste it, and I do have a free printable in the link below that'll just kind of show you how to grid this out. Reminder, these are now 2 inches apart here, but I'm going to start with a 4-inch grid so that I can use these designs when I come back for some of my alternative design as I go. Okay, now if this was a large quilt and these were real seam allowances, not chalk lines, then one of the first things we're going to do is we're going to start in the middle of the quilt at one end, and we're going to sew towards ourselves. Now, my feed dogs are down, and I've covered the bed of my machine because it's for free motion with a sew slip mat, and I have my machine gear's gloves on. So I am still thinking all of this as free motion, but I'm going to do it kind of as a straight concept is what I'm trying to say. So right now, I want to make sure my presser foot's down. I'm going to bring my bobbin thread up, and I'm going to do that here, get that out of the way. Now, what I'm looking at this moment is my eyeball is focused on the outside edge of the foot along this chalk or the seam allowance. I'm going to anchor in that stitch, and then I'm just going to slowly begin machine quilting. And one of the keys to this is when I need to stop, I'm going to stop right here. Let me get my thumbs out of the way. If you think about it, where I really stopped is I stopped at a potential intersection if there was threads coming the other direction, so that I can then recalibrate my hands. For this, I'm going to keep my hands nice and close, and I'm going to do about 2 squares at a time while I'm getting smooth at this. I want it to look as straight as possible. Okay, I'm going to start to pick up my pace a little bit as I'm getting more confident. And you can see I even extended a square. Let's stop there. Keeping my fingers wide to spread all this batting. Remember, this would be the first seam you're putting down the center of a very large quilt, and you're just following your seam allowance. Isn't it fun to use our imaginations? Okay, see my little wave starting there? As much as I like a decent swell, this is not the spot for it. So I smooth it out. Now, what's going to happen is I'm going to follow my seam allowance, my chalk line around, and I'm going to head back up. So I'm coming around here till I can see that chalk line on the other side of my foot. So I'm just using my foot as all of my markings, and I begin going this direction. And what I noticed as myself as a quilter is I was a lot less accurate going in this direction. If you can see, maybe even in the camera work, my stitch size has changed and everything. So because we have a full-size quilt in here and we're just doing straight and the needle is not moving, I can literally rotate my quilt right now. No big deal. So I am now back in the way that I am most comfortable. So I've rotated the quilt because the needle was not moving, it was in the down position, and now I can come in here and I can just keep that same method I was doing, and you can even probably see those stitches are starting to look nice again. coming on through. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna do all of your grid sewing in one direction first. And I don't mean all down, but I mean, let's call this the vertical sewing direction. So we do all of our vertical lines first, and then we go back in the center and start our horizontal lines. So I would have this one like this. And before I just do the horizontal in the middle, I'm gonna come over to the next seam allowance. Now watch this. Remember, I'm gonna pass the first, because that's 2 inches. I wanna go 4 inches away to build my grid. It looks cool. So now I'm here, I start to come down. I remember, oh my goodness, I'm so much happier when my fabric is facing this way. This is what I'm used to sewing like. And I just keep on going. Of course, you never want to sew over any pins, so I'd pop that out right there and I would move on. Now, I want to show you some of the other detail work as well. So let's pretend like we get the rest of our grid done, because I'm not, because I want to show you the rest. And I want to show you by how I started that little detailed stitching. Okay, so for the detailed stitching, I chose, let's say, the left-hand side of all of my vertical lines. And I'm going to come back in here now, and before, if I was watching on the outside edge of my foot, well, now I'm going to watch in the middle or the inside edge of my foot. So let's choose a new line to look at, and I'm going to choose the inside of my foot so I can see that thread coming through. And now as I begin stitching, coming in this direction, hopefully you can see through the clear part of that foot, look just to the right of the needle, you can see that other yellow thread peeking through there. And now as I see that other yellow thread peeking through there, I know that as I'm sewing along, I'm getting a nice parallel stitch that will add that nice accent. Let me get down to the bottom of this one so you can at least see what I've done, and then we'll start doing some of the fun detail work. Now, as I end this detailed line, though, I would just move over, to the next series of channels that I had already made, and I would do that line again so that I'm continually keeping my thread connected as much as possible. But what I wanted to point out for you here, this would be one full column, you can see here. So basically, remember, the chalk is a seam allowance, and then you have one pass, 1/4 inch out or so, this other pass 1/4 inch out or so, and then you have this other narrow little pass. So what happens is those all come back together. You get to see these fun, and of course, I shouldn't point out step number 11, of course, how wonky that one was. I think it was in this one I realized I better start spinning my things, my quilts around. But you can see how that just adds that fun little detail. But then once that's all detailed out, we still have the option to go in and do other quilting in these open spaces. Not necessary. This 4 inches is plenty of density for your machine quilting, but we can go in and do more. So let's talk about some of those other fun options real quick. Now, the first one I did early on was I just played with adding in some more grid. So I actually added in another narrow line. Then you can see actually I went this way, I followed it up, added in a line that was sewing right into the ditch now, or that would have been right on a chalk line. So sometimes you can go into the ditch to add extra loft or pucker. So that was an easy, same exact thing. Then I decided I'm going to try to do some kind of weird, just fill in straight lines inside. And you can see I only did one of those. I didn't like this at all personally, so I moved on. Didn't even fill in over here. I've put up another really cool circle grid motif, so I practiced with that. Inside of here, we have a whole different tutorial for you on that one. Got the idea to put little circles in some of the fun squares, so you can do all kinds of ideas. I want to walk you through this real basic one because it's a great fill-in, especially if you're a rag quilter. You've done this before because you need to put those crosses across those big squares you're doing. So right here is what we're going to do first. We're just going to run some diagonals, and I didn't take the time to chalk it out. I just took the time to look at it by eye. So I want my sample again. I'll show you on this one here. So let's go ahead and go over to a corner. Now, when I'm thinking diagonals, I really want to be thinking, where can I start the first time that will help me end to the best? So what I'm trying to say is 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's the quadrants, and I want to try to be ending here as much as possible. So what I'm gonna have to do is I'm gonna have to follow these lines, the straight lines, to get from section A to section B anyways. So let's go ahead and see if we can't start over in this corner up here. So I'm gonna drop that needle, lock in my stitches, and I'm just gonna eyeball a straight line to that other corner. Now when I get to this corner, I want to end up some way or another back over in this area, up in here if possible. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to follow this straight line to the opposite corner. So I'm using a new color thread so you can see, but I would be using a different color, excuse me, I'd be using the same exact color thread so you wouldn't see this second line of stitching. Now I'm where I need to be, and now I can do a straight line of my X quilting. And now I'm very close to where I want to be. I'm going to be able to stitch over here just slightly, drop a new X in. Okay, now I want to end up back over here, so let's go up this way. So a lot of machine quilting is a little bit like playing billiards. You want to set up your needle stop for your next best shot, right? Your next best successful run at this. So I'm down here. And of course, then I could drop into this and keep on moving. Now, I'm going to cut my threads real quick so I can show you, because I want to work on the chalked side. So I still have some of my chalk. Oh, I guess I took off some of my chalk markings. So can I see them on this one? Yeah, you'll be able to see a little bit better if we work on our chalk markings here. So for this, I wanted to show you kind of the reverse grid or reverse arc, so opposite from our circle grid. So for that one, we're going to start at the center point versus starting at a corner point. And I'm going to arc in an upward fashion over to the other corner. So I'm going to kind of come up straight, hugging kind of a corner in through here, and then hugging that line. Now once I'm here, I can come down, do that same motion, up here, down, back over. Now that's really cool because it's formed this neat kind of like star bursting shape inside, but I can either from this moment stop, tie off threads, or I can travel my way through my grid. And as you travel your way through your grid, you're going to start to build up some thread. So you kind of want to use a new path every time if possible, so that you don't over stitch one area and understitch the rest. One of our keys in our free motion machine quilting is being consistent in all of our work that we do. And we come down here like that. And again, I would either tie off, or best is if you can go ahead and stop, bring your thread up like this, and then if you cut this thread here, your bobbin thread should also be free, and you're ready to move on to your next spot very easily, which will bring me to my last little thing I'll show you, which I absolutely loved in the sample wherever it is. Yeah, here they are. What I did is I just put a square inside the square as I went up, and you probably can't tell, but I used my chalk for that marking, but we most definitely are going to have to do our starts and stops for that. So as we're going to go ahead and get over to the machine, I did not use my thread cutter so that I could go ahead and bring that thread tail up as I'm starting in the middle. And at this moment, I'm still using the edge of my foot along the chalk line so I can really see where I'm at. So now I'm actually looking at the edge here and the edge here to make sure that I'm going to build myself a square around the center of this grid. So I'm going to take one stitch down, one stitch up, pull that thread up and out of the way so I can grab it. I said. There we go. Okay. Foot's down. Now I'm just going to do a basic square using my chalk lines or my seam allowances. Down. I see the back of that chalk. Over. I see the side of that chalk. Up. Right over here. Right back in. And now I'll simply take a few more stitches in place. Lift that foot. Lift that needle. And as I pull this out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and cut all of these threads free in one stitch, and then I would just simply move on to the next square where I could put in another square and another square. So, as I said, super simple quilting can be all we really need in our quilts. I don't want you to quilt too much in one area and not enough in the other area, so density is still important. Give yourself the opportunity to try a super simple square grid on one of your next quilts. It's super fun, it's easy, and if you don't like free motion, of course, and I didn't mention it earlier, just to be a stinker, you can do it with your feed dogs up and your walking foot. So this is a great motif for both the regular style quilters and us free motion machine quilters. So I hope you certainly enjoyed this tutorial, and you know me, I'm always requesting new ideas on the things you want to learn from me, especially in the free motion skills and drills right here at Man Sewing. Thanks for being a Man Sewing fan. It's great to have you out there encouraging me to create fantastic new content. If you've missed any of the videos, we've got links for you here and here. And while you're checking those out, make sure you're subscribed. We don't want you to miss any of the action.